Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining the Know Your Rights training. My name is Diana Perez. I'm the Community Engagement Director for the Committee on Immigrants and Refugee Rights, chaired by Alder President Andre Vasquez. Again, this training is going to be recorded, so feel free to write any questions if you feel comfortable writing any questions on the chat. As we start, I just also want to say thank you to scaleLIT and the Illinois Head Start Association for partnering and hosting this event. But in addition to that, I also want to thank the Resurrection Project for supporting this event. I know they have been doing a lot of Know Your Rights across the city, so it's great to partner with them and to have this event with all of you. Before we start, I also want to invite all of you who are here, please feel free to write any questions on the chat, and we will be answering your questions at the end of the presentation. And now, because of timing, and I want to pass it to Laura Mendoza from the Resurrection Project to lead us in this training. But if you are joining us, please unmute yourself. That way we don't hear any background noise behind, and feel free again to write any questions during the presentation of this training, and I'll pass it to Laura Mendoza from the Resurrection Project.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Mendoza. I'm a lead trainer at the Resurrection Project. The Resurrection Project is a community-based organization. We are located in Chicago in the Pilsen area over on 18th and Ashland. We provide a variety of services, and one of our departments is our Immigration Department, our Immigrant Justice Department. So, our vision and our mission is to ensure that the immigrants in the state of Illinois are able to live a joyful, fruitful life. And so we do a lot of work in the state to make sure that immigrants are protected and included. And that is even more vital now that we have a federal government that is attacking immigrants. And so we'll be doing a Know Your Rights presentation with some information that can be shared for community and some things for you to think about as well in your centers, in your different work areas that you're in. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. One second. Okay. So wanted to start with talking about these agencies, right? As in talking about the federal government is enforcing immigration law that is attacking our immigrant community. What does that mean, and who are these agencies that are implementing those laws? So immigration law is enforced by the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS. Right? They're like the big umbrella under the federal government. Under DHS, there's 3 different agencies that have to do with enforcing immigration law. The first one is USCIS, or the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So they are the agency that's responsible for approving any application, when somebody is applying for an immigration benefit. So let's say they are a legal permanent resident and they're becoming a U.S. citizen. That application gets submitted to USCIS, and they are the ones that either approve or deny that immigration benefit. We also have U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and that is the agency that is responsible for detaining and deporting individuals in the interior of the U.S. So over the last couple of days, when we've seen immigration activity, what we are seeing is ICE agents going and detaining individuals. And then we also have U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, or CBP, right? And they are responsible for enforcing law at the border, right? So who gets to come into the U.S., who gets deported also at the border. So those are the 3 kind of like agencies within Department of Homeland Security that enforce immigration law. there has been no changes in immigration law, right? What has happened with the administration coming in is that there has been changes in the directive, in how those laws are implemented. So I do think that it's important for you to know, because people get really confused as to what's happening. Again, immigration law has not changed. It is just the directive. It is how these laws are being implemented that changes, and that the president is able to dictate and do through executive orders, through just making it known really that immigrants are not welcoming in the U.S. And so, wanted to also share a little bit about path to citizenship, right? So right now, obviously we are seeing people getting detained. We're worried about individuals who might be in deportation proceedings, but wanted to show you why some of these individuals are maybe in this position, right? Why we have 11 million undocumented people, and like that's an estimate that we think might be under, right? And so the reason why we have about 11 million undocumented individuals, it's not because people want to be undocumented, right? That's not something that somebody is hoping to be. It's not because they haven't put in an application. It really is because there just isn't a path to citizenship, right? So to be able to adjust your status in the US, and this is like obviously the very simplified version of it, but around 65% of people who are able to become US citizens do so through family-based. So that is they marry a US citizen, they have a child who's a US citizen, they have maybe a brother, sister who are US citizens, who are able to sponsor them to become a US citizen. That's about 65% of people are able to adjust that way. But even within family base, there's a lot of obstacles, there's a lot of reasons why people are unable to adjust. Then around 60% of people are able to adjust through employment base. So those are visas that are usually given to individuals. We see a lot of these visas being utilized in like tech, in the tech world, and for engineers. Also, hospitals tend to utilize a lot of these visas for nurses, doctors, so people who have like these high skills values that were high skills that were not able to find in the US. And then around 12% of people come in through the refugee and asylee process. And so those are individuals that are fleeing their home country and trying to find safety in the US. Right, right now, the refugee and asylee programs are under attack, right? The president gets to determine if these programs continue or how many people we're going to admit from the refugee and the asylee community. And so currently President Trump is saying we are not accepting anybody in the US, right? So those programs are under attack. And then around 4% of people are able to adjust through another way. So again, this is part of the reason why people are undocumented, why people right now are in danger, and why people are going through, are unable to adjust their status. And even people who are able to adjust their status, who are able to maybe go through some of these programs right now, are also in this area where they might not be able to move forward with processes just because of barriers, things that the administration might do. So let me talk about, right, so the immigration policy and landscape overview. So the president has done a lot within the month. It's been, a little bit over a month that he's been in office. And when it comes to immigration policy, he's implemented a couple of things, right? So one, there's increased border security. So that means that there's more troops at the border. There is a limit of who is able to come into the US. I want to make it also clear that they're not just limiting people who are crossing the border undocumented. They're also limiting people who have status, who are able to travel, right? Should be able to travel between the US and their countries of origin. they're also making it harder for people. So a lot more questioning that's happening at the border. Just a lot more obstacles for people to enter the US. There's also restrictions on legal immigration. So there are programs that are currently being terminated. So that includes things like temporary protective status that give people the ability to be in the US. And certain countries like Venezuela have lost now this temporary protective status. And we'll continue to see the administration kind of taking away those programs that were set up to provide some sort of immigration relief to individuals. We're also just going to see a lot of confusing systems and delays. So again, remember, USCIS is the agency that is responsible for issuing immigration benefits. We're going to see delays with USCIS. You know, something that we learned from the first administration was if e-citizenship typically takes like 8 months to do, under the first Trump administration, it was taking over a year to do. So like a simple process that you think, you know, this is something that somebody should be able to do, was taking significantly longer. We're going to start to see more requests for information. So again, putting barriers, right, making obstacles, prolonging these processes. And then we'll also see just increased enforcement, and which we have seen, right? We've started to see it in our communities with things like ICE showing up to homes, showing up to workplaces. Usually when ICE shows up to a workplace, they're looking for a specific individual unless they're doing what we call a raid. And a raid would be they are targeting a specific workplace. After, you know, investigations have been done, they're targeting that specific workplace and going and carrying out multiple detentions in that workplace of individuals who are undocumented. And then we're also going to see increased I-9 audits. So that's another thing that can happen at a workplace, right? So one thing that can happen is a raid, meaning they go and they detain multiple individuals who are working there. Or immigration could also do what's called a 9-9 audit, which is verification of documents of the individuals who work there, right? So when we start working, we have to submit an I-9, we have to fill in an I-9, and we have to provide documents proving that we're able to legally work in the US. So ICE from time to time can go and audit those documents to make sure that the workplace is following, is doing what needs to be done. And then to carry out, right, so to be able to carry out some of these things, as increased enforcement and the border security, the restriction on legal immigration, the administration is really going to focus on a couple of things. So one is criminalizing immigrants, right? And that is a narrative that we have seen and will continue to see. What the administration is publicly saying is that the people who are being detained are people who have a criminal background, right? And I'm saying it in like the nice way, because really what the administration is saying, they are criminals, right? And so that word we'll continue to hear a lot from the administration. I just want you to know that that word is being really manipulated to fit their narrative. And some people who have been detained do have serial criminal history. Others have no criminal history. And others might have minor infractions, right? One thing I can think of the top of my head is things like possession of marijuana, right? Possession of marijuana in the state of Illinois is legal. At the federal level, it is still illegal to have possession of marijuana. So if you are undocumented or an immigrant, you really should not be purchasing marijuana, because at the federal level, that is considered a crime, right? So again, this word is being utilized to just kind of fit the narrative that the administration wants and to be able to have support from the larger, broader community. Also, we're going to see expanded powers, right? So in order for the administration to be able to carry out its promise of mass deportation or deporting as many people as possible, they're going to need a lot of money, and they're going to need a lot of people to carry these things out. So one of the ways, right, that the administration can do that is by deputizing other agencies to be able to help in detaining individuals. We are currently seeing that collaboration, that expansion of powers, right, by the collaboration that other federal agencies are having with ICE. So FBI, DEA, US Marshals, all of them at the moment are collaborating with ICE to carry out detentions and deportations, right? Something that the Trump administration would want, specifically in the state of Illinois, is to deputize police, right? Meaning that police should be able to ask about immigration status, should be able to detain an individual just because of an immigration status. Deputizing the police is really going to help in the efforts to be able to detain as many individuals as possible. In the state of Illinois, there are laws that prohibit police from asking these questions, that prohibit essentially the police being deputized as ICE agents. And that leads me to my next point, which is force compliance, right? That is something that the administration does not want. The administration does not want states like the state of Illinois to say, hey, we are not going to collaborate and we're not going to deputize our police. And so it is trying to force compliance by suing the state, right? By suing the city and saying, you have to do what I'm asking you to do. And so that's being carried out in the courts, right? Where the DOJ, the Department of Justice of the Trump administration has officially sued both the state and the city, and has also, made a threat that federal funding will not come to the state if they do not proceed. So all of that is going to be carried out in the courts. And I know there's also organizations that are being, unfortunately, their funding is being cut because of this force compliance component, right, of the administration wanting people to not cooperate, to not provide services to immigrants. And so part of how they're trying to make sure that that happens is by cutting that funding off, right? Again, all of that is going to get played out in the courts. It's currently being played out in the courts. So different courts are handling cases, and there's going to be injunctions that are going to be put. And so it's something that unfortunately is not going to get resolved right away, but I do know is going to impact organizations right away if funding gets stopped. Okay, so talked a little bit about some of the local policies that help protect immigrants. So wanted to name those just for you to know. So one is the Illinois Way Forward Act, and that is that prohibits the police from asking about your immigration status, right? So police cannot ask about immigration status in the state of Illinois. It doesn't mean that they won't, right? It is written into law, but a police officer can choose to ask that if they wanted to. So it's important to know that it is protected under the law. And if police officers are asking, then they are breaking the law. There's also the Illinois Trust Act. So that is the law that prohibits police from holding an individual just for their immigration status. So that is what the Illinois Trust Act does. It prohibits police from holding an individual. And then there's the Welcoming City Ordinance, or sanctuary cities, which there are several cities throughout the state of Illinois that have these protections. And it's the same thing, right? So all of these are meant to prohibit the collaboration between police and ICE and the sharing of information between the state or the city and federal agencies like ICE. Okay. So wanted to share just really briefly about what the response has been from organizations like ours that work around immigration rights, right? This in no way is this presentation today to try to have you do this work. It's more for you to understand what's being done on the ground and how we can collaborate together. So immigrant rights organizations are working together, and essentially this is kind of like the walkthrough of like how we are responding. Right, so if there is immigration enforcement raid that is happening, we are then being notified that this is happening through our partners like you, community members, right, can call and let us know, hey, like there's immigration activity going on. So then we proceed to deploy our verification and rapid response teams, right? So we have people actually go and verify and see what's happening. We're not going to get in the middle of what's happening, right? Like a rapid response volunteer or individual is not going to go and put themselves in between ICE and the person being detained. But they are going to go and they're going to record and they're going to take notes and they're going to make sure they talk to the family afterwards to connect them to resources. And so the resources that people can have, right, it's either the legal response, so having attorneys present and or being connected to attorneys to free legal representation, as well as just community education that's going to get done in for the community at large, and then receiving family and social service support, right? So that's the idea, is that people would, we would verify, we would provide either legal representation or community education, and then just family support for those individuals who have been detained. Okay, so important things for you to know about that rapid response is that we do need people to report it. Even if it didn't lead to somebody being detained, it is important to report, just because it gives organizations like ours the sense of what immigration is doing, right? So if immigration is stopping people out in the street and just asking about their status, we need to know that, so that we can go out and get people trained. I know sometimes, people are like, well, nothing happened. I didn't get detained, so it doesn't matter. We still want to know about it. And so you can report either ICE sightings or detentions through the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugees hotline, which is that 855 number that you have on screen. Or you can also do it through our website, which is the trpimmigrantjustice.org website. And again, we'll go out, we'll go verify, we'll connect people to resources, and we'll provide accurate information to the community. Okay, so these are everyone's rights. This is kind of like the most important thing that people need to know. And so this applies to everyone, regardless of their immigration status. So you can be a US citizen, you can have some sort of legal status, or you can be completely undocumented. It doesn't matter. It is because it is protected by the Constitution, and it is a right because you are in the US. And so everyone has the right to remain silent. Really important that people remain silent. They don't have to answer any questions from any officer, whether it's ICE, the police, or any other federal agency. They don't have to answer questions. They can say that they wish to remain silent, but they do have to say it. It's not just that you're gonna stay quiet. You have to verbally express, or you have to express that you're gonna exercise your rights. And so by saying it, that's one way. And I'll go over at the end what's another way that you can express this, this right. You have the right to not permit entry to private property. So that includes your home, your car, places of worship, schools, hospitals. I know all of these are places where people are afraid to go to. All of those are private properties, and all of those have the right to deny immigration entering their space unless they have a signed judicial warrant. And I'll go over what those warrants are in a little bit, so you know what to look for. I know people are really afraid of schools, workplaces, or sorry, schools, hospitals, and places of worship, because there was a memo that said, hey, immigration, you shouldn't go into these places. But it was always a memo. So it was from the organization, from ICE themselves, telling their ICE officials, hey, don't go into these places. It was never that they couldn't go. It was just that it wasn't going to look great if they went into these places. Trump rescinded that and said, hey, you make the best judgment. But again, people like those places still have that ability to deny entry unless immigration has like these warrants. And we know schools, for example, like Chicago Public Schools have a policy where they're not allowing immigration unless they have that judicial warrant. Hospitals, we've also worked with them to be able to talk for them to have a plan, right, as to like what they would do if immigration did show up. Also, the policy for a lot of hospitals is that they would not allow immigration in unless there's a judicial warrant. So I think like that's something important for families to know so that they can continue to go to the locations that they need to. People have the right to not sign anything. Okay. Anything immigration gives you is going to have legal repercussions. So you have to be able to understand what those legal repercussions are before you sign anything. Things that we're seeing in terms of what immigration is giving people is one, when somebody is detained, individuals might get what's called a voluntary departure. And they're asked to sign it, right? And usually immigration is like, do you want this problem to go away? Do you want to see your children? Do you just want to get rid of this? Just sign here. And what people are signing usually is their voluntary departure, meaning that they're giving up their right to go in front of a judge and fight their case, their right to due process. So people should not be signing anything. Another thing that we've seen that I'd like to let people know of is immigration. Again, you could have some sort of legal status. So you could be a green card holder, permanent resident. And let's say you're abroad and you're coming back into the US. When you come back to the US, you have to go and you have to talk to an agent, an immigration agent. What we're seeing right now is agents having people sign their a document that abandons that status, right? So saying like, I no longer want to be a green card holder. And again, that document is not being explained to them. And so important for people not to sign anything. They should be talking to an attorney. They should understand what those legal repercussions are before they sign a document, because it's harder, right, to build a case around, I didn't know what this was, when something has been signed. And then they have the right to speak and be represented by an attorney. In immigration, you have to provide your own attorney. So it is at your own expense. In the criminal justice world, it's a little bit different, right? Where an attorney will be provided for you if you cannot afford one. And so in the state of Illinois, we actually have a program called Illinois Access to Justice that provides free legal representation for those who live in the state. And it's a great program that provides that ability for people to have that representation. We know that people are more likely to win their case if they have an attorney than if they don't. And then people have the right to request a telephone call. So it is important for people to memorize a phone number of an individual they would call to be able to get help. And so, again, just important, because when you get detained, your things are going to get taken away. Okay, so I mentioned that immigration cannot come into your private property unless there is a warrant. And so I'm starting with this example of an administrative warrant. And I know the picture sometimes, can be a little bit hard on the screen. It's a little too small, but I'll share at the end some resources so you can get a larger copy. But this is an administrative warrant. This is a warrant that immigration typically has. And that's why I'm starting with this one. This one is means that immigration has something, that immigration wants to detain you for some reason. They're able to detain you out in public, but they cannot enter your private property, right? It's usually just signed by an ICE official, so easier for them to obtain. The following is the judicial warrant that we talk about. So as you can see, it looks like a court document, and that is because it goes through the courts. It is issued by the courts, and it allows ICE officials to enter a property, whether you give them permission or not. If they have this document, they can legally break down the door and enter and search your property. But a couple of things that you need to know about this document is, one, that it needs to be signed by a judge. It needs to have a date. Usually, it will tell you when this is valid from. So let's say like January 21st or February 21st to February 26th, from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., right? So like a specific time and date when this warrant can be carried out. And it needs to have the name and address of the individual. And it needs to be correct, right? And it is only valid for the location that is stated on the list, right? So if immigration is coming and looking for me, Laura Mendoza, and they have this warrant and it has my home address, but they tried to come into my organization here at the Resurrection Project to detain me, they can't, right? They cannot enter this property without it. Even though there is a warrant out for me, it is not for the location I'm at, so they cannot enter that location. And immigration typically does not have these documents. earlier in the month, when there were like detentions happening, out of like 200 detentions that happened, ICE only had 7 of these documents, right? So they tend to not have it, but they do tend to lie about it, right? So immigration will sometimes say like, hey, like I'm gonna come back with it and it's gonna be much worse for you later. I'm gonna come back in 30 minutes or in an hour with this document and just gonna be so much worse for you, right? And they can't come back and get this document in an hour. It goes to the courts. It's a long, complicated process. Sometimes they will also try to show the administrative warrant as a judicial warrant. And this is the reason why we do a side-by-side and why we want people to know what these look like. You have every right to ask an official and an ICE official, like, if to show you this warrant. And it should, again, look like that court document. Okay, so in terms of identifying ICE, right, like how do I know that I'm talking to an ICE official? Unfortunately, it's really hard. One of the things you can do is you can ask an official to identify themselves, right? So what agency are you with? Who do you work with? The thing is, immigration ICE has been known to say that they are the police. So they won't always say that they are ICE. And they tend to wear civilian clothing or plain clothing. Sometimes they might have a bulletproof vest that says that they're the police. Sometimes they might have something that says DHS, and they don't have marked vehicles, so their vehicles are unmarked. So really hard to tell. In contrast, the police wear distinct uniforms, and their cars also have distinct insignia. So, something I've been telling people is if you see a police officer and they are clearly the police, right? They have the Chicago police uniform, they're in a Chicago Police Department car, kind of like proceed as usual, right? They cannot and should not be asking you or detaining you because of your immigration status. If you interact with any other law official that is that does not have an insignia that you can determine whether or not they are ICE, kind of like proceed with caution, especially if they're asking you questions about your immigration status. Okay, so what can people do if they are detained? And I think this is just like, I'll make it a little bit more general. I think people should have a plan, right? I think something that we're seeing a lot is people really being afraid. And part of it is because they're thinking about all of the things that could go wrong, all of the things that could happen. And it is important for them to think about, like, what can they do? What should they have ready? What happens if they are detained? So if somebody is detained, they should only provide their name and date of birth. They don't have to answer any other question to an immigration officer. And you're honestly not even required to do that, but in order for family to find you, that's going to be important. You want to memorize your 9-digit number and provide it to the attorney you're going to contact. You can ask to speak to a lawyer, and you should always ask to see a judge. The judge can set bond for people. So I think a lot of people are thinking about like the deportation process right now. Like, I'm going to be detained and I'm going to be deported right away. For some people, that might happen. For the majority of people, they're going to be able to go through a court process, right? So usually somebody gets detained, let's say at their home, they go to a processing center, and then they get transferred to a detention center. And then at the detention center, they'll be able to talk to a judge. If the judge sets bond, they're able to go free and handle their case from, while they're with their family. If the judge does not set bond, then they stay inside, detained, and they handle their case there, right? But either way, for most people, they'll have the ability to go in front of a judge to fight their case. Important for people to not carry an ID that identifies them from a city of or from a citizen of another country, right? And you should not be talking to an officer about what country of origin you're from. So if people have like their matriculas or their passports or any other ID that identifies them from a citizen of another country, they should not be carrying those. Instead, in Illinois, you can have either the city key if you are a Chicago resident, or you can actually get your state ID now as well. If you don't have a social security number, you're still able to go into the Secretary of State and get your ID. So those are things that people can carry with them that doesn't differentiate them. Okay, so this is more if somebody is detained, right? Like, what can you do? How can you help them? So one is you can help locate people through located.ice.gov. So this is a federal website where you're able to put in the person's name, A number, and country of origin, or their name and their A number, and it would show you what detention center they're at. This is important because one is there's no detention centers in Illinois, so people get transferred to either Wisconsin, Indiana, or Kentucky. And two, immigration doesn't have to notify the family or the individual if they're being moved or transferred to another detention center. You can also, families can also call their consulate's emergency phone number. The number that you're seeing on screen is for the Mexican consulate. The Mexican consulate has this emergency line for their nationals to be able to receive help if they're being deported. And if they're from any other country, they could call their consulate and check, right? I don't have like a full list, but this is specifically for Mexico. And then the person who pays bond needs to have legal status. And so 100% of the bond needs to be paid. So the minimum bond for immigration is $1,500. There is no maximum, and the average of what we're seeing is around $6,000. So a lot of money that a family might need to have. And then as well, that friend or family is going to help call the attorney or legal representative. Okay, I won't go into that because I do want to save some time for questions. So resources. So for legal resources, you can go to trpimmigrantjustice.org. There's a network of immigrant serving organizations that have free legal representation. The only requirement is that you live in the state of Illinois. People can come to a Know Your Rights presentation. I think again, part of the first step is for people to understand kind of their rights, the networks that are available, the resources. And so we have virtual ones that we do every Tuesday at 2 p.m. in English, and then every Thursday at 6 p.m. in Spanish. So they go more into depth into like what can you do? They're focused more on like the individual who might be at risk of being detained and deported. And then also, again, really important to report that raid or report any police that is asking about your immigration status. So some resources there. As well as there's these Know Your Rights, we call them door signs, or more like fridge signs, I would say. It has the basic information that I shared with you of our rights. It also has the pictures of I'm sorry. I was going to sneeze. Okay, so it has the pictures of the administrative warrants. Again, it's for people to have near them to just remind themselves of like, these are the things that we need to know. One side is in Spanish or English if they want it. And then the other side that doesn't have the pictures is always going to be in English. And the idea is that if immigration comes to somebody's door and they're unable to communicate with them, they can show them this document to communicate and to let them know that they're not going to open the door, that they do need to see that warrant. There's also the little Know Your Rights cards that, again, I'm sure you've seen. Hopefully you've seen. They can be either a green color, a red color, or this white color. It doesn't matter. They're all the same. It just is about people being able to remember their rights. And then also remember how I said you have to express that you're going to exercise your right, like your right to remain silent. If you are unable to remember that, then you can issue this little card, and this acts as you stating the fact that you're going to remain silent. And it also has a phone number for the hotline to be able to report if you're seeing an ICE sighting. That number is going to be important if people are, like, let's say in their car or in their house and immigration is outside. They should not be calling 911 or 311. The police can't do anything, right? They can't show up and help out. But the ICER rapid response team can, show up, can provide some help. And so that's a good number for people to have in their phone and to have with them in case of an emergency. And then I think it's really important for people and organizations themselves, for your own, work site, workplace, to think about a plan and think about the before, the during, and the after, right? So the before would be things like communication channels. Who do you need to be talking to? Have you done a Know Your Rights presentation like the one that we're doing? What are people's roles? All of that is going to be important. The during is going to be like, what happens if immigration does come to our workplace or to our home? Who's going to be responsible for talking to law enforcement? Who needs to be notified? Kind of like just like this in-depth plan. And then the after is going to be, like, how are you documenting this? Are you doing community outreach? And for an individual, right, it would be before, it would be doing the Know Your Rights, talking to family. The during is like, what is a family going to do if immigration comes to their house? And then the after is, do you have documents set in place? Do you have a plan for your family? And I won't go too much into this because I know we have questions and I want to honor that time for questions, but I didn't even put it in there. Give me 1 second. Let me stop the share. But I can, and I will, in the follow-up, we'll share, we will share the plan, like, for organizations. So if you're thinking for your own site where you're located, if you want to have a plan, we wrote down just like a guide to be able to help through some of the things that you might need. And then also we have a family plan for families. So let me actually show you, give me 1 second, our website. So I'm really going to continue to kind of push our website because we really have worked to make it a hub for information and services in the state of Illinois. So you can go to our website, which is crpimmigrantjustice.org, and you'll see a couple of things. So one is you'll see legal assistance. So this is for people who are looking for legal representation. Our priority right now, and what we really want to make sure is if somebody has been detained, we will contact them within like 72 hours to be able to connect them with an attorney. And then there's like all the different options that I won't go into this. There's a whole partner list that we have of different organizations throughout the state, throughout the city, that provide this legal representation work. As well as there's resources. So there's more Know Your Rights information here on our website. And there's a printable toolkit that we have with the little card that I showed you, the door sign as well. And lastly, that family plan that it's supposed to be, and it's meant to be just a guide for, let me show it here. It's supposed to be a guide for people to be able, for families to be able to talk through some of what's happening and collect documents and data. And so all of that is located there. Okay, so I will now stop and allow for questions.
Thank you, Laura. Let me stop the recording and then we'll go into the Q&A.